The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, everyone, to the webinar series organized under the framework of the long-term energy scenarios for clean energy transition. My name is Asami Miketa from IRENA's Innovation and Technology Center, and I'll be hosting this webinar today. So this is a campaign under the Clean Energy Ministerial, and we aim at promoting the wider adoption and improved use of long-term energy scenarios in guiding long-term transition to clean energy. I would like to introduce to you two speakers of today. The first one is Jesús Duque, Mr. Jesús Duque, from Mexico Secretary of Energy, and he's going to talk about the one of the three topics. I forgot to introduce three topics. One is the better use of scenarios. The second topic is improving scenarios, and the third topic is the building capacity within the government sector. So Juice is going to talk about the using scenario topic. And then next one is Gustavo Naciff from the Energy Research Office of Brazil. And he will be talking about topic 1, using scenarios, and topic 2, improving scenarios. Each speaker has 20 minutes and 15 minutes for presentation and 5 minutes for questions and answer. The webinar will be recorded and then shared through IRENA's webpage. Before we begin, I would like to briefly introduce how to operate the webinar 500 user interface. So all of you are currently muted and will remain so throughout this webinar. And if you have a question, please send your question to us using the question section on the webinar panel. Questions can only be viewed by us and not shared with other audience. We will be monitoring the questions throughout the session and select some to be answered by our panelists at the end. And due to time constraint, we apologize in advance if your question is not answered by the end of the session. If you experience any technical difficulties, please try to reconnect by dialing in by phone. You can get the number by clicking on the phone option located on the webinar panel. You may also download the presentation slide in the handout section. If your technical difficulty remains unresolved, you may write to us through the question section. So we will try to help. So with this introduction, I hope you could hear it well. I would like to introduce the speaker from Mexico, Jesús Duque. So the floor is yours, Jesús.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm here in the Secretary of Energy from Mexico, and I would like to share with you the experience that Mexico has been using scenarios for decision making. In particular, how we use the scenarios in the energy transition law that was published in December 2015 here in Mexico. In this energy transition law, we include a clean energy goal fulfillment scenario from 2050 to 2050 in order to get some view how we expect is going to be the clean energy goals fulfillment for the next decade. Next, please. The next sheet, please. Well, here is the energy transition law. His object is to regulate the sustainable use of energy and the obligation on clean energy. Also, it regulates the reduction of emission from the electricity industry. In the Article 4, the law says that we have an energy strategy in order to establish goals so that the consumption of electric energy is satisfied through a portfolio of alternatives that include energy efficiency and an increasing proportion of generation with clean energy. Here at the Secretary of Energy, we promote the generation of electricity from clean energy sources, reaching the levels established in the General Law of Climate Change for the electricity industry. Next, please. Next sheet, please. We introduce the transition strategy to promote the use of cleaner technologies and fuels. This is called the energy strategy. In December 2, 2016, the Mexican federal government published in the official journal the update of the energy strategy, in which Mexico established how we envision for 2050 the state of the general electricity, the generation of electricity for this year. The strategy has medium and long-term planning components. That means for 15 and 20 years. And it consists with the best practices. This strategy was made from a series of analysis and studies and diagnoses, and we include a clean fuel power sector scenarios for 2050. This way, the strategy constitutes a guiding instrument of national policy in the medium and long term in terms of clean energy obligations, sustainable use of energy, and improvement in energy productivity in order to cut reduction of emission in electricity industry. The next, please. Next sheet. Here we can see what are the goals we have to meet. Considering the prospective or horizon of 50 and 20 years established in the strategy, it is necessary to identify the technical and economic feasibility to have generation matrix that allows achieving the clean energy goals adopted by the government of Mexico. We can see how the goals established in the law is fixed, for example, for 2021, 80% must be from clean energy fuels for electricity generation. For 2024, we have to get 30%, 35% of clean energy should be for electricity generation. This way, we have to increase to 40, and to get to 2050, we should have the 50% in the electricity generation must be from clean energy fuels. What is the meaning for clean energy for the purpose of the goals we have to meet? Well, we include in a clean fuels all the generation based on fuels that has carbon capture and sequestration technology. We include also hydro, nuclear, any renewable energy sources like wind, solar, bioenergy, and others. And also we include efficient cogeneration. That is a term applied to cogeneration plants that meet the criteria of Energy Regulatory Commission. These are the goals. Well, the next, please. Next sheet, please. So, in order to improve the energy strategy, we include long-term energy scenarios for the fulfillment of clean energy goals in the generation of electricity. We use a model that optimizes the generation per plant, taking into account the available transmission capacity. We fix like a restriction that the model has to fulfill the goals that we put in the strategy, and then the model invests the last cost expansion of the system. It can simultaneously add both the generation and transmission capacity. This is done based on a catalog of describing investment costs and other key information for the different possibilities. The analysis performed indicate that the wind and solar power, due to the expected decrease in cost, will become important generators in the Mexican power sector. For example, in this graph, we can see the blue one and the green one, how they are increasing in the generation of electricity for the next decade. For example, we can see how the aeolic is increasing all the years, and also the green one is increasing. That is the solar photovoltaic solar is increasing, and we have also an important proportion of hydro for the next years. So the scenario of fulfilling of clean energy goals with the optimization model show that is a growing tendency in the use of clean energies for the generation in the electricity in the next decades for Mexico. Wind and solar generation become economically attractive. This means there is a socioeconomic benefit in having large shares of clean energy in the Mexican electricity system. Next, please. Here we have how it is increasing in the blue one. We have the proportion of clean energy for the next years, how we see the increase of clean energies are increasing gradually up to 2050 when we get the 50%. Clean energy become important fuel for the generation in the Mexican power sector. Clean energy in 2030 is estimated to get 37% of total generation. In 2040, it's expected to have 44, and in 2050 to be the 50% of total generation. Well, the next, please. So we have the next comments in order how we use the long-term energy scenarios for decision making. The elaboration of long-term clean energy scenarios by the Mexican government has been a useful instrument for the application of the energy transition policy. The simulation of long-term scenarios helps to evaluate the feasibility of meeting the long-term goals. Like you see in the graph, we see that we can have an increased proportion of wind and solar and hydro for the next years. We have to identify different areas of opportunities for the development of energy sector, where has possible risk. It helps to fix the long-term expected trajectory in the behavior of clean and conventional energies, establishing reference parameters for the application of the policy and the necessary energy measure to get the goals. It gives also a parameter to evaluate the actual behavior observed and his deviation from the results obtained in the estimated scenarios. For example, when we are making the results each year, we can observe how much we are getting the goals that are established in the law, and how the deviation is a parameter in order to improve the policies. The long-term scenarios in which the proposed goals are achievable can generate an environment of greater certainty which stimulates investment. For example, if we see in the scenarios that the proportion of wind and solar and hydro are achievable, it's a very good indicator in order to promote and to give certainty, and it can stimulate investment in this kind of technologies. In the case of Mexico, the results of long-term scenarios of energy transition strategy show that the long-term goals are achievable, which has favored investment in clean energy. We have seen a great investment in the last three years in clean energy, given that we estimate that the goals that are stipulated in the law are achievable, and they give some certainty to the investment. For example, we can see in the next slide, please. The next slide, please. This is the result of auctions that has taken from 2017 to 2018 in Mexico. We have seen highly competitive prices in the auction that we have taken in the last 2 years. For example, we see a reduction in the price of the offering package that the firms make in the auction. Here we can see how we have the average price of the package was $48, decreased in the second auction, and also decreased in the third auction up to $20. That means a big reduction, and we expect this kind of behavior can be also seen in the next auction that is going to be taken in the next year. So this is a result because it's a decrease in the generation cost with renewable energies in the world. This decrease is given mainly by very important factors like a technology and innovation in all the new technologies that have the renewable technologies. Also, the competition in the market favors the decrease in prices, and a greater experience of the developers is the next factor that stimulates the decrease in prices. This way, the incorporation of downturn trend in the cost of renewable technologies in the long-term scenarios results in a high penetration of renewable energies in the generation matrix for the following decades. We can see in the next slides how are the results in the case of Mexico. For example, we see that to promote the clean electricity generation, the auction are the main mechanisms in order to promote this kind of technology. The auction are the policy that gives the mechanism to reach the goal that by 2024 we can reach 35% of the electricity generation will be in clean energy. How we have the results of these three auctions? We now have 7,000 megawatts of new capacity is from clean generation. We have 65 new plants along all the country, And we have in our country invested 8.5 billions of dollars in clean generation, and 70 states, local states now have new clean plants in Mexico, and this is almost the 50% of the total states in the country. So Mexico has the 60 most attractive economy for renewable energy. We see that by 2020, Mexico will have 4 times the wind and solar capacity that it had at the beginning of the 2012. These are very important achievements that we have been in Mexico in the last 3 years. We can see in the next slide, please. The high investment expected in clean energy that is promoted in Mexico will transform the generation capacity for the year 2030. For example, in this graph, we can see that in the year 2012, the capacity was 63,000 megawatts, and only the 27% was in renewable, mainly in hydropower, that was the 21%. But given the investment that we are expected, we are estimated that for 2030 we can reach an amount of 210,000 megawatts, that and the renewable proportion will increase to 49% in this year, mainly in hydropower and wind, and also we have expected a high proportion on geothermal and biomassa, and in a solar photovoltaica, that it can reach in the solar around 7%. So this is our expectation for the next decade. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Mr. Duque. Now, people who are attending, you can ask questions. Maybe we start with one question. So there should be scenarios that are also available from utility or companies. How are these plans coordinated with the plans that government has?
Okay, what the question?
The question was how the government plans are coordinated with the plans from the utility.
Well, the coordination is given by several institutions, mainly the power, electricity, that is the main firm that has control the dispatch of the electricity, has a central operation, and the central operation is given every day and every week the dispatch, how the implementation of the new plants are going to operate in the system. This is the main firm that can control and is watching the evolution of the clean energy support for the electricity.
Okay, thank you so much. We have some more questions that came. Let me start with a small clarifying question about the last slide. Is it referring to the investment or capacity? 2030 to have 50% renewable is different to the 36% at slide 7. So this is a smaller question, and there are a few bigger questions. What are the plans? What are your plans for nuclear energy? Is that program currently under development? Do you plan on developing your own nuclear capacity, or will you be contracting or collaborating with another country? Let me also just go one more question. So another question is, how are the future uncertainties captured in the model? So maybe we start with these 3 questions.
Okay. For the model, we are trying to improve our estimation because this model use information that I think we have to upgrade, actualize with the new information in order to see maybe how can change with the new performing of the clean energy cost, because the cost in the world are decreasing very fast. So we want to introduce new information in order to make it again the simulation for the 2050, and we expect that maybe the proportion of clean energy will increase compared with the scenario we see in this slide. That's all.
There are some other questions about nuclear power program. Maybe you can comment on the nuclear power program, and also maybe you can clarify the number on the last slide, whether this was a capacity value or investment. I have a few more questions, but let you answer this question first.
Well, we are expected to have a high investment in clean energy, because we see the auction of the last 2 years. We see a high participation of many firms that want to sell the electricity to the power company of the state, and we see that the investment projection for the next years is going to increase, given the people we are high interested in participating in the new environment that Mexico is created to promote the clean energy technologies for the generation of electricity in Mexico. We have some figures about the investment in these next years, and we see an increase of almost 10%, 10 to 20% for the next 10 years.
Okay, Yes, there are many more questions, but maybe just let me select one. Have these scenarios been assessed for their cumulative CO2 commitment? Does Mexico have any target limit for total future cumulative CO2 consistent with the Paris Agreement?
Okay. Well, the scenario gives us the scenario that we show here. We assume that the targets are going to be accomplished by restriction. The model optimize the how will be the least cost technology that will accomplish this kind of goals, and is the least cost investment for the next years gives the model the result that we see in the slides. I mean, it's a result that given the cost of investment in the different technologies, the model optimizes and gives the best solution for the next years. And we can see how the solar and wind and hydros and all other and others clean energies are economically favorable in order to invest. That's why we are optimistic that we can get the goals for the next decade.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for the questions and answers. There are more interesting questions, but because of the time, I would like to move to the presentation from Brazil, Mr. Naciff. Maybe if we have time at the end, maybe we can come back to some of the remaining questions. Let me open the slide. Mr. Naciff, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Hassan. Good afternoon. My name is Gustavo Naciff de Andrade. I am a technical advisor at Brazilian Energy Research Office, also known as EPE. I work at Energy Economics area of the company, and I'm here today to present how long-term energy scenarios are being used in Brazil. Next slide, please. But before we go through the presentation, I would like to talk a little about Energy Research Office. We are a federal institution linked to the Brazilian Ministry of Mines and Energy. EPE was created by law 10,847 in 2004. We developed studies, data, statistics to support formulation, implementation, and evaluation of energy policies. Next slide, please. To support the formulation, implementation, and evaluation of energy policies, we are constantly analyzing the Brazilian energy market. In that sense, just for didactic purpose, we can divide the work of EPE into three main groups. The first one we call Energy Statistics Group, and it is related to the very important function of providing free information to society and markets. Information is an essential element to deal with the market failure of asymmetric information. The availability of information ensures the best allocation of resource, and it is indispensable in decision-making process. The following products of EPE are related to that theme. Brazilian National Energy Balance, Statistical Yearbook of Electricity, EPE Web Map, Monthly Review of Electricity Markets, among others. The second group of products are the national energy plans. Typically, EPE produces a 10-year national energy plan and a national energy plan with longer horizon. EPE's current 10-year expansion plan is currently under public consultation, and the national energy plan is currently under development, and you can find more details in these links. The third group is the studies associated with energy policy function. This is a very relevant, and the EPE develops a lot of these studies. To illustrate here in this slide, we present a few that are also available in English in our website. This group involves studies in energy auctions, transmission solutions, market design, among others. Next slide, please. So why use long-term energy scenario? From our point of view, it's important to develop a dynamic and resilient long-term energy strategy in an uncertain context. This approach allows the development of a strategy for the transition, considering aspects such as competitiveness, energy security, sustainability, decarbonization, and other important aspects of energy system future. It is also important to identify competitive advantages in the national energy sector. As energy is a strategic factor for economic competitiveness, the long-term planning process offers a special growth opportunity when the competitive advantages are well explored. Scenarios are also important to improve the decision-making process and help organizations or specific energy policies to deliver more results. Next slide, please. So the next step is to understand what is the value of long-term energy scenarios. And the answer is associated with how useful and usable the stakeholders perceive it to be. The utility of knowledge products like long-term planning are often discussed in terms of the influential triad of knowledge criteria for sustainable development, like proposed by Cash et al. So we have to have these main things: salience, wherever stakeholders perceive it to be relevant to their needs at the time; credibility, wherever stakeholders perceive the information to be rigorous and truthful; and legitimacy, wherever they perceive it to be fair and unbiased. Next slide, please. Well, this framework represents that long-term energy scenario is a continuous process. The construction process needs to be made considering economic, technological, and environmental perspectives in a complex and uncertain context. In this context, from our point of view, it is really important to keep the energy long-term scenario always updated and adapting it considering all the new information and studies available. If the scenario is updated, it will be used to develop products such as national plans or policies studies, what means that it will be useful and valuable for the stakeholders. It is important to keep in mind that since the scenario is a continual process, national plans and energy policies studies can be interpreted as pictures of this process in a period. But that picture can recommend and implement actions that might change the original scenario, which means that there is a feedback process between the scenarios and the studies developed from them. Next slide, please. So, one of the possible products from long-term energy scenarios is the national energy plans. These plans' goals are some of these that, like indicative outlook expansion of the energy industry, integrated view of energy sources, provide the market with better information to support investment decisions, point out future situations that require near-term decisions from the government perspective, and provide some what-if analysis as a way to be prepared to deal with uncertainty. EPE develops two types of energy plans. The national plan that has a longer horizon analysis. In 2007, it was published for the first time, and its horizon analysis was until 2030. Currently under development is a new version with horizon analysis until 2015. This study aims is to use integrated modeling approach for long-term energy scenarios. Some of the studies that support this new plan are already available on the web and on the EPE website. The second type is the 10-year expansion plan that is published annually. A 2027 plan is currently under public consultation. Next slide, please. Next slide. In the next slides, I will show some examples of policy studies that can be only made from a previous long-term scenario study. The first example is the Brazilian NDC regarding energy production and use. The definition of the path used is tied to a series of long-term studies and that generated the elements for the quantification of these commitments. The analysis of the proposal for all energy productions and use activities shows that it can be considered ambitious and challenging, but fully feasible. Next slide, please. Okay. Brazil NDC applies the economy-wide concept, therefore is based on flexible ways to achieve goals. But Brazil's NDC shows the following commitments regarding energy production and use activities. First one is increase the share of sustainable bioenergy in Brazilian energy matrix to approximately 18% by 2030. This is by expanding biofuel consumption, increasing ethanol supply, including by increasing the proportion of advanced biofuels of second generation, and increasing the share of biodiesel in the diesel mix. And the other one is to achieve an estimated 45% share of renewables in the energy matrix by 2030. And the other one is obtain at least 66% share of hydropower in electricity generation by 2030, not considering self-produced electricity. The next one is expand the use of renewable energy sources other than hydropower in the total energy mix to between 28% to 33% by 2030. And the next one is to expand the domestic use of non-fossil energy sources domestically, increasing the share of renewables other than hydropower in the power supply to at least 33% by 2030, including raise the share of wind, biomass, and solar. And the last one is to achieve 10% of efficiency gains in the electricity sector by 2030. Next slide, please. Okay, and the next slide is another example of energy policy studies. In 2017, Brazil set a national biofuel policy that we call Renewable, whose main objective is to recognize the importance of biofuels in the Brazilian energy matrix with relation to energy security and mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions in the fuel sector. Renewable is designed to introduce market mechanisms to recognize the ability of each biofuel to reduce emissions individually by producing units. Basically, there are two main instruments. Instrument one is the establishment of a national emission reduction target for the fuel matrix defined for a 10-year period. The Ministry of Mines and Energy used the demand and the supply of fuels from EPE long-term energy scenarios to support the definition of carbon intensity reduction. And the instrument two is the certification of the production of biofuels by private inspector firms, with different grades being assigned to each production unit. The higher grades will be assigned to the producer that produces the highest amount of net energy with lowest CO2 emissions in the life cycle. The connection of these two instruments will occur with the creation of the biofuel decarbonization credit that we call CBIO, that will be a financial asset traded on a stock exchange issued by the biofuel producer from the sale of its production. Next slide, please. Here another example of policy studies that EPE develops using its long-term energy scenario. And it's related to energy efficiency actions. It's currently under development is a study that proposes actions to promote energy efficiency in air conditioners in the Brazilian residential sector. The studies compare two scenarios, a base scenario, which considers policy already announced by the government for the coming years, and an alternative scenario, which considers more ambitious minimum energy performance standards up to 2035. The results shows impressive gains that can be obtained with additional energy efficiency measures. Next slide, please. Our conclusion is that the value of long-term energy scenarios can be considered in terms of how useful and usable these scenarios are to the stakeholders. in that sense, our scenario is widely used to support studies that EPE develops to support Brazil government decision in energy policy issues. And long-term energy scenarios can also provide to the market better information to support investment decisions, especially in the case of our 10-year expansion plan that is widely used too by the market agents to support this kind of decisions. Energy policy studies are developed better and faster as there is already a long-term energy scenario developed. And finally, long-term energy scenarios studies is a continuous process and must be always updated so it can be used at different times as strategic tools. That's our presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your presentation. The audience, if you have questions, you can type in the question area again. Let me start with the question that actually we received for Mexico presentation, but I think it's also applicable for this presentation. How do you define the resilience of their system, your system, and if it's included in the planning process?
Yeah, it's included, and that's why our scenario has an integrated approach that's to guarantee that our system of energy as all, not only electricity system, but our system energy as a total energy system is capable to be resilient with different situations that appears to us. So we try to do a lot of analysis of how certain uncertain facts can affect our resilience. So we do a lot of what-if analysis to stress some kind of parameters and say that we are confident about our plans that it assures us resilience to our energy system.
Thanks. Maybe then the same question as we had before with the Mexican colleague. How are the scenarios, the government scenarios, coordinated with the plan from the utility?
So in Brazil, especially talking about the 10-year plan, we are an indicative plan that shows the government perspective for the energy sector for the next 10 years. And the utilities usually are very interested in that plan, because as it shows government scenario, it also shows to them a market information that is valuable, that is how Brazilian energy market will grow in the next years. So they in this support future auctions that the government might prepare, because here in Brazil we have the regulated markets that are supplied by auctions that are prepared by the government, considering information from the utilities of their demands. So it's this kind of relationship.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me ask two more questions. One is quite relevant to this question. Are the scenarios explorative, making what-if analysis, or normative to optimize options to reach certain goals? So that's the first question. The second question is, what role have the long-term energy scenario played in determining the targets identified on slide 9? Are those targets determined by projection results, or are they set to be more ambitious?
Yeah. The first one was, sorry, Asami, I forgot the first one was.
Yeah, the first one was, are the scenarios explorative, making what-if analysis, or normative to optimize options to reach certain goals? So it is more.
They are more. Yeah. They are more exploratives, and we try to understand what is happening in the sector and what might requires government decisions in the near term to enable what market needs. So what-if analyses are widely used to in our scenarios to stress this situation, and also to assign what needs to be done, and what, when some kind of decision is not made, what are the impacts of this over the energy sector. And the second question was about, sorry again, I forgot.
So what role have the long-term energy scenario played in determining targets identified on slide 9? Are those targets determined by projection results, or set to be more ambitious?
Yes, when we were asked to do this for the NDC, we have already our long-term plan, but we did it a little bit more aggressive than it was originally made. So that's the relation. We try to be more ambitious in our goals when we did the NDC, although we adopt the economy-wide concept, so it's flexible. You don't have to do exactly this, but it's a way to achieve the global commitments of Brazil. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So let me just choose the last question. The last question was, is the energy plan proposal include generation transmission only, or another energy investment like biofuel transformation plants?
Yeah, this is a very important one. Our plan, we do it integrated, so it's about all Brazilian energy sector, not only electricity and transmission. Includes fuel, and it's an integrated vision of planning.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we are about time to close. We are a little bit over time. Thank you very much for two great presentations, and also thank you for great questions. I'm sorry if your questions are not picked, but I will make sure that panelists will receive the questions. So let us now close the presentation here. As I said before, we are going to post the recording of this webinar as well as the presentation on our website. Next one is going to be next Thursday at the same time from colleagues from Canada. So I hope many of you can come back, and yeah, see you next time. Thank you so much.